Hey guys, tonight we drift gently into the middle of the Pacific, where the stars hang low, the waves pulse like ancient lullabies, and your mattress is a creaking canoe held together by coconut fibers and optimism. You're barefoot, you're sunburned, and you're about to spend a full day learning how to cross oceans without a compass, a GPS, or even a napkin map. No pressure, but you probably won't survive this if you go it alone. Polynesian wayfinding isn't for the casually curious. It's an oral science, a poetic system, a lifetime of sleeping with one eye open and the other watching Orion's belt. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is over there. Drop it in the comments. It's always cool seeing where this sleepy little fleet of listeners sails from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up curled against a rolled mat, head resting on your own folded arm. The sea is a deep breath beneath you, rising and falling with slow intention. You don't remember falling asleep, only that the last thing you heard was the chuckle of someone gutting fish nearby. Your body aches from yesterday's paddling drills, and your shoulder has a new sun rash shaped suspiciously like a gourd. The scent of salted plumeria drifts past, followed closely by the funk of fermented taro. Breakfast is either going to be delicious or absolutely not. A shadow blocks the sun briefly. One of the older crew members passes by, his hair in tight gray coils, face lined like an old palm leaf. He gives your ankle a friendly nudge with his foot. Still sleeping? The clouds won't wait for you. You rise slowly. The canoe is massive, lashed together with hand-woven rope. Its two hulls joined by a platform just wide enough to sleep on, eat on, and occasionally argue on. You're one of 6 apprentices aboard, and definitely the most likely to trip over a water gourd in the dark. Everyone else is already moving, checking knots, scraping barnacles, or humming old chants as they rinse their faces with salt water. There's no bathroom, unless you count the entire ocean. The sky is a soft wash of peach and blue, a little bruised from yesterday's storm. A few birds dart overhead. You notice one steering into the wind, then turning back the way you came. Your brain logs that without knowing why. At the stern, the master navigator sits cross-legged. He doesn't speak much, but when he does, the canoe goes quiet. Today, he signals for everyone to gather. You shuffle over and sit beside a boy who hasn't spoken since day 2. You don't know if it's a vow of silence or just extreme social anxiety. Either way, his hair smells like fish guts and his knees are always bandaged. The navigator lifts one arm and points not to the sky, but to the water. No compass, he says, no written maps, no clock. We sail by signs, and signs do not wait for you to finish your nap. Polynesian navigation, he explains, is a full body task. You are not just looking at things. You are feeling, memorizing, comparing. It's a living map you store behind your ribs. Everything tells you something, from the way the canoe creaks to the flavor of the morning air. You nod. Someone else sneezes. The navigator looks offended. He points at a patch of water in the distance. It looks like every other patch of water. But apparently, that particular ripple has a shape. It curves against the wind in a subtle arc, like the print left behind by a sleeping turtle. Island out there, he says. 2 days away, maybe 3, depends on the current, but she's there. You squint. You see nothing. Everyone else nods like this is normal. You try to nod too, but probably look like someone trying to remember their Wi-Fi password. Your first task is to scrub the deck and memorize the angles of the morning sun. Not for fun, but because the angle between sunrise and the edge of the canoe tells you what latitude you've drifted toward. Later, they'll quiz you. It won't be a friendly quiz. As the sun climbs, someone boils breadfruit and hands you a slice. It's starchy and hot and tastes like bland ambition. You eat it anyway. The navigator suddenly points behind the canoe and shouts something in a clipped chant. Everyone looks. A school of flying fish has broken the surface and darted in a zigzag. You realize the crew is reading them like a text message. Flying fish only leap certain ways at certain times of day, depending on currents. They're like ocean emojis for, you're drifting west. You try to file that away, but your brain keeps repeating fish, fish, fish like a broken fax machine. That night, your back aches and your eyes burn. but you're still awake under a spread of stars that feels indecently close. The Milky Way is fat and glorious above. You breathe in the scent of seaweed, wet rope, and your own regrettable foot. As you lie down, the navigator speaks again. Tomorrow, you'll learn the swells. Tonight, just watch the sky. You do. One star winks. Another drifts. You don't know their names yet, but they seem to know yours. Morning starts before your body is ready. The sky is still bruised with the last shadows of night when the navigator wraps the side of your sleeping mat with a paddle. You sit up groggily, salt crusting the corners of your mouth, unsure whether the ache in your back is from lying too still or being jostled in your sleep by a particularly judgmental crab. Everyone else is already moving. One apprentice is pouring seawater over their face with a coconut shell. Another is tightening lashings near the outrigger while muttering what might be a prayer or a complaint about your snoring. The air tastes like brine and something gently fermenting. Possibly bananas. Possibly socks. Today is your first formal lesson from the master navigator. You're not sure if that's an honor or a trap. He sits cross-legged near the bow, with a small, tattered pouch beside him made of woven bark fiber. Inside are what appear to be pebbles, shells, and a few oddly shaped bits of coral. You scoot forward, trying not to look as nervous as you feel. He doesn't look at you directly. Instead, he holds up a shell. "This is your compass," he says, except it isn't, because the sea laughs at compasses. You wait, hoping for elaboration. "There are no magnetic poles here," he says. "No lodestones, just motion, rhythm, memory." You nod slowly, pretending that made perfect sense. Meanwhile, your brain offers the helpful thought. You have no idea what you're doing. He sets the shell down and spreads his fingers over the deck. "We use signs, and signs come from experience, not metal." You learn that navigation here is not about drawing lines. It's about sensing patterns. The ocean is not blank, it's textured. Each wave, each ripple, each lazy swell has a direction, a tone, a hidden whisper that tells you where you are and where you're drifting. You stare out at the sea. To you, it still looks like wet blue soup. But to the navigator, it's a language. He talks about swells that come from storms hundreds of miles away. These are not the waves you see, but the ones you feel beneath the canoe. Deep, regular pulses that glide silently under the surface like ghost whales. They persist long after the storm dies. Sometimes for weeks. They move in straight lines and can be traced like cords stretched across the world. You're told to lie down, flat on your back, arms loose. Let the canoe tell you what it knows. So you lie there. At first, all you feel is your own heartbeat and a vague need to pee. Then, slowly, you begin to notice a rhythm. A deep, even rise from the left. A softer dip on the right. It's as if the canoe is breathing in a different direction than the wind. The navigator nods approvingly. That's the east swell. He claps a hand against the wood. Underneath, there's a second swell. Feel it? You don't, but you lie very still. Brow furrowed like you're solving a math problem with your spine. Eventually, you sort of do. A smaller, faster motion hidden inside the big one. A cross current. It's subtle, like a second hand tick against a clock face you can't quite see. That one's from a storm south of the Tuamotus. 10 days ago. Still moving strong. The apprentice beside you whispers. He's never wrong. Then adds. He once predicted a reef using just his ankle hairs. You want to laugh, but also you believe it. The man is half coral, half weather. Later that day, you're assigned a stretch of hull to monitor. Your job is to sit, watch the horizon, and memorize every wave that breaks pattern. You're not entirely sure what that means. So you invent your own criteria. You stare until your eyes burn. A bird flies past. A fish jumps. Your stomach growls. You note each event like you're filing a tax report. Midway through your shift, the navigator joins you silently. He squats beside you and gestures at the waves. You see that? You don't. There. That V-shape. Like a roof tile. Still don't. He points again, this time guiding your chin with 2 fingers. You feel a little like a telescope. Then you see it. A faint V etched by 2 intersecting swells. Not from wind, not from the canoe, just 2 invisible forces colliding far beneath the surface. Reef, he says, underwater, far away, but there. You blink. There's no foam, no rocks, just water. He continues. Sometimes, clouds pause there. Sometimes birds circle. Sometimes floating sticks gather. The sea hints. Always. You ask what happens if you miss those hints. He shrugs. You drift forever. Or until a shark gives you directions. That night, as you eat roasted breadfruit with salted seaweed and pretend to enjoy it, you feel different. A little taller. A little more porous. Like your skin has learned to listen. One of the crew sings an old chant. It's about a canoe shaped like a spine, paddled by the stars, filled with travelers who never slept, only dreamed with open eyes. You fall asleep trying to imagine what that would feel like. Historians still argue whether Polynesian navigators memorized thousands of swell combinations, or whether it was more intuitive, a bodily knowledge passed without words. Either way, you're starting to suspect your intestines might be smarter than your brain. Dawn breaks like a whispered dare across the ocean. The sky is pale and damp, the kind of color you get when someone waters down pink with yesterday's gray. The clouds stretch long and low on the horizon, not lazily, but as if they've been told to keep watch. And today, you are told to kneel. You shuffle across the deck on calloused knees, careful not to kick a water jug or someone's elbow. The canoe groans softly as it slides over another swell. Beside you, the navigator is already crouched at the edge of the hull, one hand trailing in the sea like he's stirring soup. Today, he says, you listen to the ocean's bones. That sounds dramatic, but nobody else reacts, so you nod sagely and try to look like your ears are calibrated for aquatic whispering. He begins tapping the hull with his knuckles, counting silently, then pointing forward. Swells come in families, he mutters. Some arrive alone, others bring cousins. They all travel from their homeland. You try to hear what he hears. At first, it's just wave, wave, wave. Then, maybe, you detect a pattern. A longer rise, a pause, two short bumps. Then it repeats. East-northeast, he says, from an island chain too small for maps. It clicks. Barely. The ocean is not chaotic. It's a layered rhythm section, each swell playing its own drumbeat. Polynesians called them moana and gave names to each kind. Some were big and slow. Some were sharp and angry. Some were old travelers that had crossed half the planet just to roll beneath your canoe like a lazy priest. He tells you to turn around and straddle the hull, one leg on each side. Close your eyes. This feels like a trap. You do it anyway. Suddenly, every sway becomes clearer. With your legs split and your eyes closed, you can feel the boat tip slightly left every fifth wave. That's not from the wind. That's from the deep swell. You'll learn it in your bones. He says, after a while, your knees will feel distance better than your eyes. Later, you're given the task of adjusting a lashing on the outrigger, while crouched there with a knot between your teeth and one foot in the water. You notice something strange. The sea here feels off. It's not the water itself. It's the way the canoe glides over it. Just slightly stickier, less rhythm, like the swells are confused. The navigator notices too. He frowns and walks to the bow, watching the waves like a fortune teller reading palms. Two swell systems, he says. One old, one new, one from the storm last week, one from something brewing to the north. You ask if that's dangerous. He says nothing, but starts tightening ropes. Quirky fact. In some traditions, navigators were trained from childhood by lying them in shallow pools, blindfolded, while elders created artificial swells. If the child could tell which direction the ripple came from, they got fish for dinner. If not, just taro. Lots of taro. As the day wears on, the sky grows heavier, not with rain, but with messages. The clouds are starting to stack in odd shapes. You notice some of them hang lower than others, like wet towels suspended from invisible wires. The navigator points to one in particular. That cloud, he says, sits above shallow water. You squint. How do you know? He shrugs. She's tired. Her belly sags. It's not exactly scientific, but you believe him. Historians still argue whether Polynesian navigators could consistently predict islands by reading cloud behavior alone. Some say it's myth. Others point to field studies showing how certain cloud types do indeed linger over land because of thermal and humidity differences. Back on the canoe, nobody's arguing. They just nod and adjust the sail. You spend the afternoon trying to map the swell patterns in your head. It feels like solving a puzzle while riding a roller coaster. But something clicks when the sun leans west. You begin to feel the shift before the canoe even tilts. A short, fast ripple crosses your spine. You look up. The sails are being lowered. You were right. That night, you lie under the stars again. But this time, you chart them in your mind. One cluster, then a dark patch, then a single bright dot to the southeast. It feels like a lullaby in dots and lines. The navigator hums something nearby, a soft tune that bends like wind. You wonder if the ocean is always speaking this clearly, and humans just forgot how to listen. Your stomach growls. No fish tonight, just taro. You close your eyes and let the canoe rock you to sleep. Every fifth sway pulls a little longer than the last. Before sunrise, someone shoves a damp banana leaf into your hand. It holds a slice of raw tuna, warm from the sun's memory and smelling strongly of everything the ocean regrets. You eat it anyway, not because you're brave, but because your stomach has stopped giving you choices. The sky brightens slowly, not in a blaze, but in a blush. Faint pinks and sleepy blues bleed across the water, painting the surface with a soft sheen that reminds you of old oil on concrete. The canoe creaks. Someone nearby coughs like they swallowed a crab sideways. Today, the navigator wants you to learn from the fish. You're skeptical. You've met fish. They're not known for their cartographic skills. But the navigator insists. He kneels beside the fish baskets, carefully lifting each one and murmuring like he's checking old scrolls. You watch as he runs a finger down the length of a shiny silver body. This one, he says, holding up a goatfish, likes the lagoons of high islands. She doesn't come near low atolls. You blink. This fish has a geographic preference? Apparently, yes. Polynesian navigators didn't just fish for food. They fished for signs. Certain species are loyal to specific habitats. Flying fish prefer open ocean. Parrotfish nibble coral in shallow lagoons. Some deepwater fish rise only near seamounts. In other words, what ends up in your net is like a census of the nearby underwater world. One apprentice, clearly proud, presents a pufferfish like it's a winning lottery ticket. The navigator wrinkles his nose. That one's just lost. You're assigned to sort the morning's catch. It smells exactly like what it is. Wet, scaly, and mildly accusatory. You separate fish by size, color, and sheen. A few still twitch. One seems to glare at you. You glare back. While gutting a triggerfish, you notice something odd in its stomach. Bits of brown seaweed, a sliver of dark shell, and a tiny pink crab. The navigator peers at it, nods once, and says, "We're near Volcanic Reef." You're amazed. You once struggled to identify the toppings on a pizza. Now people are divining tectonic features from fish vomit. Later in the day, you help one of the older crew clean the fishing lines. She hums a slow chant and points to the horizon. See that? The birds over there are following needlefish. Needlefish follow skipjack. Skipjack follow the warm current. That current curls past an island group 3 days away. You stare at the birds. They look like birds, but apparently, they are feathered oracles. You ask how she knows the fish are skipping that way. She snorts. Because yesterday's water tasted warmer than usual. And I have knees that ache near undersea ridges. Right, of course. You look at your own knees. They say nothing. Later, you help haul in a net. It's heavier than expected. Inside, flapping and furious, is a mahi-mahi nearly the size of your torso. It thrashes wildly, sending seawater into your face and dignity. The navigator peers into the net and grins. That's a good omen. You wait for him to elaborate. He doesn't. Apparently, mahi-mahi are open water hunters. They only appear when you're truly far from land. Except during their mating seasons. When they sometimes flirt with coastlines like indecisive tourists. The fact you caught one here suggests something unusual about the local current. Something promising. Historians still argue whether Polynesian navigators could reliably identify nearby land based solely on fish behavior. Some call it intuition built from generations of trial and error. Others believe it was practical marine biology wrapped in poetry. Either way, it worked. You're floating proof. Around midday, the sun climbs high and burns like a judgmental god. You hide beneath a woven shade and chew on dried pandanus. The fish scent lingers on your hands, hair, and, somehow, your toes. You gave up on being cleaned 3 days ago. You listen as the crew discusses the last 4 catches. Each fish has a story. That parrotfish? Shallow coral nearby. That squid? Deeper drop off to the west. That eel? Bad luck. Do not cook it. You nod, trying to absorb all the details. But it's a bit like drinking seawater to cure thirst. One of the younger boys asks the navigator how far they're from home. The navigator snorts. From which home? Everyone laughs, then quiets. The ocean stretches wide and endless. No islands in sight, but beneath the surface, everything is talking. The fish, the current, the shifting temperature. Even the taste of the water has changed. Saltier, fatter somehow, like it carries the breath of an island not yet visible. That night, as you lie on your back beside a bucket of very judgmental crabs, you try to recall the sequence: fish type, stomach contents, feeding depth, associated currents, bird behavior, moon phase. Navigator's eyebrow twitch. Your brain gives up and shows you a vision of a fish riding a cloud while singing about kelp. You're too tired to correct it. You fall asleep to the creaking of the ropes, the slosh of the net buckets, and the feeling that every fish today brought you a secret. You're woken before the sun by the sound of someone tripping over a bucket. Judging by the sharp intake of breath and the quiet swearing, it's the same apprentice who once mistook a starfish for a sea cookie and tried to eat it. You blink at the sky. It's still mostly black, but streaked with dull silver hints that morning is thinking about arriving. The air feels cooler than yesterday, edged with the kind of breeze that makes your skin prickle and your joints second-guess your life choices. Today's lesson is sky maps. The navigator is already perched like a heron at the bow, staring upward, completely ignoring the chaos of 3 sleepy apprentices bumping into rigging and one losing a sandal to the sea. You sit beside him cross-legged, trying to match his pose, and failing immediately because your left leg has completely given up. He points at a massive cloud bank low on the horizon. You see her? He asks. You don't see a her. You see a lump. That's an island cloud. Tall belly, flat base, doesn't move much. You squint. Still a lump. He lets out a breath through his nose. Like he expected this. Look again in 1 hour. If she hasn't drifted, land is beneath her. Turns out, clouds are terrible liars. Regular ones drift and shift and unravel like cheap fishing line. But the special ones, the ones that sit like squat queens on the horizon, they're telling you something. They gather over islands because of rising warm air and sea moisture. They hang there, day after day, marking land like an invisible billboard that says, "This way to coconuts." You're handed a shell bowl of fermented noni fruit and immediately regret every decision that brought you to this moment. It smells like someone insulted a mango and let it rot out of spite. Still, it's considered sacred. You drink it. Your tongue files a complaint. By mid-morning, the sun has broken free of the horizon and the clouds shift colors. Some shine, others darken, a few ripple like fabric. The navigator begins pointing and naming them, the high drift clouds of fair weather, the thin streaks that mean wind from the east, and the low heavy ones that mean you're probably going to get rained on in about 40 minutes. One cloud, way off in the northwest, catches his attention. It's tinged with a strange gray-green hue. Freshwater, he murmurs. Island beneath it with lots of ferns. You don't even bother arguing anymore. The man could probably predict your dreams using the shape of a single raindrop. Later, you learn that traditional navigators sometimes used cloud reflection on the water as a cheat sheet. A big island cloud would cast a distinct color or shadow onto the sea surface. Especially during calm periods. It's like nature's very slow, very dramatic PowerPoint presentation. Historians still argue whether these cloud signs were consistent enough to truly guide voyages, or whether they were one of many overlapping hints used only when conditions were just right. Either way, the Polynesians trusted them, and in this world, trust floats better than doubt. While some of the crew trims sails and preps dried seaweed snacks, you're assigned lookout duty. You sit cross-legged on the outrigger platform with a small carved stick to use as a pointer and a coconut leaf hat to keep the sun from melting your face. Your job is to track a particular cloud bank and record how much it drifts in relation to the morning star. You are given no tools, just your eyes, and a thin slice of panic. At first, nothing happens. The cloud holds still, like a perfectly obedient island beacon. Then it shifts a little. Then again. Your notes are messy. You may or may not be pointing at the wrong cloud entirely. The navigator checks your results. He says nothing, just gives you another slice of dried taro and pats your head like a dog who tried. Still, you feel like something's changing inside your skull. The clouds are starting to look less random. You notice how some curl upward in spirals, how others puff out like steamed buns, how a few have sharp underbellies like they're hiding rocks. Even the color means something now. A slightly red-tinted base might suggest volcanic soil below. A deep bluish gray might hint at thick jungle. A yellow haze could mean sunset. Or possibly, someone forgot to put out the cooking fire again. You begin to spot patterns. Clouds that form after certain wave rhythms. Clouds that disappear when the swell angle changes. It's a slow language, spoken across hours. By late afternoon, a new formation appears on the edge of the western horizon. The navigator smiles, just barely. There, he says. That cloud has been there since morning. Doesn't move. Island ahead. 2 days. The apprentices gather around to watch it. No land is visible yet. But the mood changes. Attention loosens. A few even sing a soft verse about landfall and ripe fruit in dry sleeping mats. You hum along, slightly off key. That night, you lie back under the same sky that terrified you 2 weeks ago. But now, the stars are friends, the clouds are messengers, and your knees still ache. You drift to sleep thinking of that stubborn little cloud, waiting patiently over the island like it's reserving a seat just for you. The morning begins with shouting. Not panicked shouting, but the loud, sleepy kind that comes when someone forgets to tie down a fish basket and now half the ocean's dinner is swimming in very confused circles near the outrigger. You're handed a net and a grumble and sent to help scoop up escapees before they dive back into freedom. Once the emergency ends and the tuna are contained, the navigator gathers the crew. Today, he says, is a bird day. You try not to look disappointed. You were hoping for something dramatic, like storm reading or shark diplomacy. But instead, you're spending the day watching the sky again. But not for clouds this time, for wings. He points to the east where a lone seabird skims the horizon. Frigate bird, he says. She's not fishing. She's heading home. Apparently, in the vast theater of Polynesian navigation, birds are the recurring guest stars. And their habits are reliable, if you know how to read them. He goes on to explain, certain birds only nest on land. They can't sleep on water. So, if you see one far at sea, heading in a straight line around dusk, it's probably flying home for the night. You follow it. You find land. Simple as that. Well, not that simple. You spend the morning squinting at the sky through a reed visor someone made using palm strips and leftover sandal thread. You're shown how to tell the difference between noddies, terns, and boobies. Each has its own flying style, its own cruising altitude, its own preferred snack schedule. You watch one dip and swerve in a zigzag pattern. The navigator taps your shoulder. That one's hunting, not useful. Later, a white tern flutters past high above the canoe, coasting in a gentle arc. The navigator nods approvingly. She's going home, that direction. You're given a sketch slate, just a plank of wood and a piece of charcoal, to record the bird's path. Your lines end up crooked and suspiciously resemble a snail. Still, you're told the direction is mostly correct. The navigator smiles like a teacher who knows you cheated but appreciates the effort. Here's the quirky part. Traditional navigators sometimes kept track of individual birds. Gave them names, learned their quirks. One bird might always leave at the same time. Another might take a weird curved route home, maybe because of a wing injury or a personality flaw. These birds became floating reference points, like living GPS satellites with opinions. You ask how far birds can travel. The answer is, it depends. Some go out 50 miles to fish, then return. Others only fly 10. Some migrate between island chains seasonally. And the best navigators? They memorized these patterns, logged them in chants, and passed them down like bedtime stories with wind and feathers. Historians still argue whether these oral maps were reliable enough for long-distance voyaging. But the Polynesians managed to populate almost every speck of land from Hawaii to New Zealand. That's not exactly luck. Around midday, you're instructed to build a temporary perch on the outrigger. A bird perch, not because you're inviting company, but because it helps birds rest. And a resting bird can lead you back home if treated well. You lash together 2 sticks and a bit of dried rope. The result is structurally questionable, but upright. Afternoon brings a small flock of terns circling in the distance. The navigator watches closely. They're dancing. There's a shoal nearby. He's right. The water darkens in patches and fish leap from the waves like they're late for something. A crew member casts a line. Within seconds, it jerks violently and a fat, glistening fish is pulled aboard. Everyone cheers. Even the fish seems impressed. You spend the evening watching one particular bird. It has a bent tail feather and a dramatic flying style, like it's performing for an invisible audience. The navigator chuckles. That one always acts like someone's watching. But she gets home the fastest. You name her Captain Drama and make a mental note to follow her if ever stranded. As dusk falls, the sky shifts to a palette of bruised lilac and orange. The birds grow restless. One by one, they begin to fly toward the same patch of sky. Not directly overhead, not randomly, but steadily, purposefully. You ask the navigator how he knows which direction to trust. He says simply, "The birds have never lied to me. Not once." That night, you lie beside the sail bundle, your arm dangling over the deck edge. You replay the paths the birds took, drawing invisible lines across the stars. Captain Drama flits through your dreams, leading you toward an unseen shore, her wings flickering in and out of moonlight. You wake briefly when a real bird lands on your homemade perch and lets out a fart-like squawk before promptly falling asleep. You smile. Tomorrow, you follow her. You wake to the sound of whispering. Not human whispering, but the dry rustle of sails being loosened in the wind, the low creak of rope shifting under tension, and the splash of someone rinsing their face with seawater like it's coffee. The sky above is still wrapped in stars, each one stubbornly refusing to fade. You sit up and realize it's Starpath Day. Your back protests. Your face feels like it lost a fight with the sun. But your legs carry you forward. Because today you get to learn how to steer by the heavens. You take your seat near the bow, next to a fire-charred plank where the navigator is drawing dots with a piece of coral. "These are your brothers," he says. "They walk you home when the ocean forgets." The plank is filled with clusters, small constellations drawn from memory, passed down like family recipes. You recognize a few: Orion's belt, the Southern Cross, maybe something that might be Pleiades if you squint. But the rest? Completely foreign. You're told each star rises and sets at a fixed point on the horizon. Polynesian navigators memorized where those stars touched the edge of the world, using them as directional markers. Each star had its own path across the sky, and by following it, they could sail straight even when the sun hid or the birds ghosted them. "Pick one," the navigator says. You point to a bright one in the east. "Sirius." He nods. "Follow her tonight. She's loyal." You memorize her rise point using a simple trick. You hold out your hand, fingers splayed, and measure her distance from a lash point on the mast. It's crude, but it's tradition. Polynesian navigation includes hand measurements, body positions, and mental horizon grids. Your arm becomes your compass. Your eyes, your sextant. Quirky tidbit. In some navigation schools, kids were taught to lie in dugout canoes and stare at the night sky until they could recite dozens of star paths in sequence, like lullabies that could also save your life. By mid-morning, the navigator explains how different stars take over as the night progresses. When one star sets, another rises at the same angle but in the opposite quadrant. They're paired intentionally in what's called the star compass. You follow one for a few hours, then switch to its cousin. You practice shifting focus from one to another. It feels like passing the baton in a relay race where nobody speaks and everyone burns hydrogen. "Don't just look," he says. "Feel them move." Historians still argue whether these star paths were used during overcast nights or kept mostly for clear skies. Some believe there was backup navigation using swells and instinct. Others argue that star memorization was so thorough, navigators could track invisible stars behind clouds based on timing alone. Later, you're tested. The navigator covers your eyes with a woven blindfold and spins you gently, then removes the cover and points to the sky. Which star was your path? You panic for a moment. Everything looks wobbly. Then you spot her, Sirius, just above the sail tip. You nod. He doesn't smile, but he offers you half a dried banana, which is basically a standing ovation in his language. That evening, you prepare for your first real steering test. You're handed the guiding pole, just a long oar wrapped in sharkskin grip, and told to align the canoe with your chosen star. Every few minutes, you must adjust for drift, sail pull, and swell influence. You're terrified. Also, your pants are still wet from a rogue wave earlier. You grip the pole, Sirius blinks above the horizon. Calm and confident, you aim the bow toward her. The wind presses the sail gently. The canoe hums forward like it understands. You focus. Every time the canoe veers, you realign using hand markers and muscle memory. You don't speak. You barely blink. You forget you're tired. You forget your name. You sail by a dot of light older than cities, steadied by nothing more than belief and repetition. Hours pass. At some point, the navigator takes over without a word. You sit down, legs trembling, mind floating somewhere between awe and sleep. The stars spin above. Your skin smells like rope and wind and your own nervous sweat. You lie back on the deck. One of the crew sings a star chant, listing 20 constellations in a rhythmic loop. It sounds like a song to keep children calm, or sailors sane. You wonder how many nights you'd have to live like this before the stars stop being distant and start feeling like family. Maybe it's already happened. Your last thought before sleep: if the stars ever fell, these people would still find their way, by the tilt of a swell, the curl of a cloud, or the sound of a bird returning home. You smile. Sirius is still there, watching. The day begins with debris. Not emotional debris, actual floating bits of the world. You're sitting on the outrigger platform, eating something vaguely breadfruit-shaped. When you spot it, a chunk of bark, a coconut husk, bloated with seawater, a weathered stick, strangely smooth on one side. The navigator sees it too. His eyes narrow, and he gestures for everyone to quiet down. The sail creaks. The ocean gurgles beneath the hull. You chew slowly. Pay attention, he says. The ocean is shedding clues. Today, your lesson is drift indicators, objects adrift that hint at where they came from, where you are, and what's nearby. Polynesian navigators were masters of noticing what others ignored. A single branch in the middle of nowhere could suggest an entire island just over the curve of the world. The navigator hooks the coconut husk with a long pole and lifts it aboard. He turns it in his hands like a puzzle box, cracked too long ago to be ours. Waterlogged, soft edges, drifted maybe 30 miles. He sniffs it. Yes, sniffs it. You don't ask why. You accept that this man can probably smell latitude. He tosses it aside and examines the bark chunk. This one's heavier, speckled with tiny barnacles. A small snail clings to it like it's clinging to hope. From river mouth, he mutters. Highland trees, volcanic island nearby, freshwater runoff, maybe 4 tides away. You're told to start collecting anything that floats. Leaves, seaweed, even bubbles. Yes, bubbles. Apparently, even froth can betray secrets if you know how to read it. Quirky fact: Polynesian navigators could sometimes identify the type of tree bark floating in the water and match it to known islands. That's right, they were essentially doing forensic botany while sailing across 1,000 miles of empty sea. By midday, the canoe crosses a wide patch of drift. Bits of wood, a broken paddle blade, half of what might once have been a woven mat. It looks like a memory scattered across the water. The navigator's face changes. He crouches at the edge of the canoe and whispers something under his breath. Not quite a prayer, not quite a warning. He points to a fish swimming oddly beneath the surface. Something spooked it. Big fish nearby, or something bigger. You grip the rail tighter. Historians still argue whether drift-based navigation was used with scientific precision or if it was more like improvisational poetry guided by experience. Either way, it worked. Modern researchers have even recreated ancient Polynesian voyages using drift patterns and proven it's possible to island hop this way. If you know what to look for, you spend an hour watching a leaf circle a whirlpool. Not a dramatic one, just a lazy little spiral near the hull. The navigator smiles when you point it out. Tides shifting. You feel pleased. You understood something. It only took most of the day and 2 sunburns. Later, one of the crew pulls up a chunk of floating pumice. You're told it's from an underwater eruption somewhere weeks ago. It drifted here, skipping like a stony gossip. You think about all the things the ocean holds and hides. Bits of trees, stories, bones, maybe sandals. That evening, the sky turns gold. The water reflects it, shining like warm metal. You see a patch ahead where the watercolor shifts, slightly greener. Almost olive. The navigator notices. Shallow seabed nearby. Maybe coral sand. Maybe reef. You stare at the exact same patch. It looks like water. You don't argue. He lifts a piece of driftwood again. She's curved. scraped on rocks. That means land was close when she started drifting. Everything drifts, he says. Fish, logs, people, even memories. The key is to know what direction the drift began, and what it bumped into along the way. You stare down into the waves. Somewhere beneath is a story too deep to shout. Only the surface gives hints. A flying fish skips past your ear like a dart. Everyone laughs. It smells like victory and seawater and panic. You lie down later beside a pile of sun-dried nets. The stars are starting to peek through the dusk. You spot one bird still circling high overhead. Maybe lost, maybe watching. In your hand, you hold a small, dried leaf you fished out of the sea. The edges are curled. It smells faintly like something once alive. You don't know where it came from, but it feels like it brought a message, even if it didn't speak. You drift off wondering what you would look like if the ocean were reading you. The night is quieter than usual. The sea hums low, like it's halfway asleep. The wind barely stirs the sail. You wake slowly, blinking at the stars above. They seem duller somehow, blurred by moisture in the air. There's a weight on everything. Not heavy, just hushed. The navigator is already awake. You hear him at the stern, doing something that sounds suspiciously like talking to the waves. Not with words, exactly, more like pauses. A conversation made of silence and glances. Today, he says, is a listening day. Your task is simple. You sit still and listen for things you cannot see. He leads you to the bow. There, you kneel, hands on the hull, eyes closed. The canoe bobs gently. Every creak of rope, every slap of wave against wood becomes louder without your sight. He tells you to focus on one sound, the deep, rhythmic boom just under the surface. That, he says, is surf. You blink. Surf? But there's no beach. He nods. Not here, but somewhere. The sound travels. And suddenly, you start to hear it. Faint, distant, but there. A soft roar, pulsing every few seconds, rising and falling like breath through coral lungs. It's so far away that the idea of hearing it feels absurd. But it's real. You're hearing the heartbeat of land before land reveals itself. This is one of the oldest techniques in wayfinding. When the stars are gone, when the sky is blank, and the clouds are smug, you listen. Large islands with reefs make surf. Surf makes noise. That noise travels farther over water than sight ever can. Historians still argue whether ancient navigators relied on this method regularly or only in perfect silence. But modern replications have confirmed it works. With trained ears and calm conditions, surf can be heard from more than 20 miles away. You're told to listen for direction. You do. It's louder when you tilt your head slightly left, softer to the right. You're like a human compass with wet hair and a mild headache. Then the navigator lifts a conch shell and blows through it. The sound is low, deep, and wide. Not music. A message. One that bounces back off the world. You wait. He nods again. Echo, he says. Apparently, under the right conditions, even sound can bounce off islands. A faint delay. A muffled return. Like the ocean answering you from behind a curtain. You try it. You shout something into the dark. Just a test word. Mango. It feels silly. But you wait. And maybe, just maybe, you hear something come back. It's probably your imagination. The navigator says nothing, but hands you a piece of dried fish. Another silent passing grade. Later, someone notices the birds flying lower. Another hint. Sometimes, before land is visible, birds descend and circle invisible shorelines. You follow their pattern with your eyes and it matches the swell. The waves are shifting slightly, longer intervals. Broader pulses. The navigator confirms. We're skimming a shelf. You're confused. There's still no land. He explains. The seafloor rises gradually near islands. That changes how the water behaves. Waves stretch. Currents slow. Even the canoe's glide shifts. Less bounce. More slide. You close your eyes and feel it. It's like driving from gravel to smooth stone. Quirky fact. Some navigators trained themselves by sailing close to islands blindfolded. Learning to identify when the underwater shelf began just by how the canoe moved. That, or they were just really into dramatic stunts. You spend the afternoon cross-checking, sound, swell, bird pattern, cloud base, watercolor, and the taste of the air. Yes, the taste. The navigator dips his fingers in the sea and flicks droplets toward his mouth. Less salt, he murmurs. More fresh water in the wind. You try it. It still tastes like ocean. But maybe slightly more river-ish? You're not sure. You tell him it tastes like wet string. He nods as if that's extremely insightful. Historians still argue how much of this was ritual and how much was science. But maybe it doesn't matter. The body doesn't need to know the equation to feel the answer. As the sun begins to dip, the crew gets restless. Someone thinks they saw a shape on the horizon. Another thinks it was a bird flying low. The navigator squints and says nothing. He just steers slightly left. You don't see land, but you feel something has changed. The sea is shallower. The swell is softer. The canoe hums differently beneath your knees. You lie down that night listening for the surf. You hear it, faint but steady, like a whisper just behind the curtain. You sleep with your head tilted toward it, toward land that still hides but no longer feels far. Your eyes open to color. Not sound, not motion, but color. The sky is a soft tangerine. The clouds above the horizon lined in molten gold. And the water glimmers like brushed metal. But it's not the light that strikes you, it's the green. A faint greenish tint pulses through the waves around you. Not all of them, just patches, just enough to make you squint. Sit up, and rub your face with both hands to be sure you're awake. You are, and you're nearing land. Sea color, the navigator says, standing behind you, arms crossed over his chest. One of the oldest signs. He points toward a stretch of shimmering olive water. Shallows, sand underneath, maybe a reef, maybe an island shelf. Today, you learn to see with more than your eyes. The ocean is not just blue. It's 1,000 shades. Each one whispers something different. A rich navy might mean deep trench. A lighter turquoise? Shallow coral flats. A murky green? River runoff or algae bloom. A silvery glare? Maybe a smooth lagoon nearby. You're handed a paddle and told to help steer toward a particularly strange patch. A streak of pale teal surrounded by deeper green. As you approach, the navigator leans over the side and gestures for silence. Below, the water ripples oddly. Not from waves. From the current striking something unseen. Maybe rocks. Maybe sand ridges. He nods. Edge of a reef. No GPS. No sonar. Just eyeballs and instinct. Quirky fact. Traditional Polynesian navigators often memorized watercolors associated with different islands. Some kept visual maps not on paper, but in the form of chants describing the color changes in sequence as you approached. The sun climbs higher. Now the sea changes again. Yellow-brown patches appear. Disturbances caused by coral heads. You're told, some just below the surface, some further down, but all dangerous if ignored. The navigator adjusts course by a finger's width, avoiding a collision you never saw coming. You wonder how many times your canoe has survived purely because someone noticed a change in hue. You're handed a palm fan, not for cooling, but for shading your eyes. The navigator teaches you to squint sideways across the water, using the angle of reflection to better judge depth. The sea lies, he says, but not to everyone. Historians still argue how much of this knowledge was intuitive and how much was taught methodically. Some researchers believe navigators used consistent color cues for generations, while others say it was more art than science. This crew doesn't care what historians think. They see colors like cartographers. Around midday, the sun is nearly vertical and the reflection is blinding. You're told to kneel low, keep your head shaded, and watch for sudden color breaks, shifts that signal sandbars or sudden drop-offs. The crew grows quiet, focused. Even the birds seem to fly lower, angling themselves toward shorelines they already trust. And then, without warning, the water turns glassy. Not everywhere, just in pockets. Smooth, too smooth, almost like oil. The navigator crouches beside you. There, he says, lagoons, protected water, land just beyond. You stare and finally see it. The faint outline of something darker on the horizon. Not a cloud, not a wave, something steadier, thicker, still mostly hidden by mist. You blink, it disappears. You blink again, it returns. The canoe shifts slightly, tilting with the swell, and then another shadow appears beside the first. A mirror twin. The navigator confirms it. Double reef, island within. There's still no smell of soil. No rustle of palms, but your body knows. The wind has changed, the salt is heavier, and something smells faintly like birds. Later, you're given a section of dried pandanus to chew on. Supposedly it helps clear the tongue and makes you taste the air better. You're skeptical, but chew anyway. You taste a hint of dirt. You say so. The navigator grins. Then we are close. You spend the afternoon watching the shadows in the water shift as the sun lowers. Coral heads become visible. The green glows richer. The color layers stack like a topographic map with no numbers. And finally, just before the sky turns orange again, you see it. Not a mirage, not a trick, a real shoreline. Low hills, coconut trees, a few birds circling in lazy, satisfied spirals. Someone on the canoe lets out a soft whistle. Another hums a landfall chant under their breath. The navigator gives no speech. He just pats the hull once and points. Color never lies. You lie down that night with green still dancing behind your eyelids. Your dreams are full of rippling light and shallow coral shelves. The ocean doesn't look like a void anymore. It looks like a painting. One you've finally learned how to read. The canoe glides differently today. You feel it even before your eyes open. There's less bounce, less sway, a smoother motion, as if the sea is patting your steps. You sit up and notice the sail has been lowered. The paddles are out. The wind is calm. The water, too. The navigator taps the side of the hull with his knuckles. Thunk thunk pause thunk. A rhythm you've learned to recognize. It's the canoe's heartbeat. And today, it's relaxed. We're skimming the edge, he says. The seafloor rises here. Your task is simple but strange. Sit still. And feel everything. The swell isn't gone. Just thinner. Lighter. Like a stretched bedsheet instead of a wool blanket. Every time a wave passes, the canoe lifts, not sharply. Not lazily. But with a certain rhythm. You begin to sense a pattern. A long roll. A pause. A short push. Another long roll. You're riding the sea shelf. Says the navigator. If the canoe changes rhythm, we change direction. Polynesian navigators used this method as a final check before landfall. When the swell changed subtly, when the boat's bounce shifted even slightly, it meant the sea beneath had grown shallower. The canoe didn't just float, it told them where it floated. Historians still argue whether this feeling was teachable or instinctual. Some think it came from decades of sailing. Others believe children could learn it by being rocked to sleep in hulls from birth. One theory suggests that navigators actually calibrated their own internal balance systems to detect micro changes in movement. Essentially, the human body as GPS. The sun climbs. The canoe coasts gently. The water is the color of green glass and just as calm. You're handed the steering paddle. Your job? Maintain direction while the navigator teaches you how to read the canoe's reaction to underwater terrain. He crouches beside you. Feel the shift? At first, no. Then, yes. A subtle tug to the right. Not from current, not from wind, from the hull itself. The water beneath is thicker somehow. He nods. Silt shelf. We're over it now. Deep coral to our left. Sand to our right. You want to ask how he knows. But you don't. The question feels unnecessary. Like asking the moon how it knows when to rise. Later, you help bail out a small pool of water collecting near the bow. As you do, your hand brushes the floorboards. And you feel it again. The low tremor of the canoe adjusting. It's not sudden. It's like shifting your weight in bed when a breeze touches your feet. You mention this. The navigator claps you on the shoulder. You're learning. Quirky fact. Some navigators trained their bodies to respond automatically to sea changes by sleeping in shallow dugouts rocked by elders mimicking swell rhythms. If the child woke up at the wrong time, they got more seaweed stew. If they timed their breathing to the swells, they got fish. That afternoon, the wind returns briefly. The sail goes up, but only halfway. The canoe glides over a stretch of water that shimmers like silk. You're told to watch for the reef whisper. What's that? You ask. The way the canoe speaks before she grinds. He says. You stare at him. He adds. You'll feel it in your knees. You're not sure if this is literal or some ancient metaphor. But 20 minutes later, you feel a change, a different sound, a slight resistance, like the canoe is brushing fingers against something just below. You glance at the navigator. He nods. That's it. No bump, no crash, just a breath of hesitation. The water darkens around you. Coral below. The colors are brighter. The fish more confident. You've reached the near edge of something. By late afternoon, the waves barely move. The canoe is guided more by paddle than current now. You see shadow patches in the water, reefs, rocks, maybe sandbars. The navigator names them as you pass. Like greeting old friends. You ask how he remembers them all. He answers, because I've forgotten everything else. You believe him. The evening comes warm and soft. The sky turns purple. The ocean sighs beneath you. The canoe barely moves unless you ask it to. The feeling of stillness is almost overwhelming. That night, lying beside the sail bundle again, you can still sense the hull's subtle shifts. You can feel how the front rides higher now, how the back pulls slightly left. You smile into the starlight. The canoe is no longer just wood and rope. It's an instrument, and you've begun to play it. You wake with someone chanting in your ear. At first, you think it's a dream. The voice is low and rhythmic, each line like a tide lapping against memory. Then you blink, and the sunrise slaps your eyes with a honey-colored glow. The chant continues. It's not a song, it's a map. The navigator is already up, standing at the center of the platform, his eyes closed, his hands moving subtly with each phrase. The words pour from him like water from a cracked gourd, steady, familiar, inevitable. Today, you learn the memory paths. They are not written down. No scrolls, no carvings, just chants, long ones, short ones, some with rhymes, some just rhythm, each one encoding distances, angles, stars, swells, bird routes, even what kind of fish prefer the waters near a particular reef. You sit cross-legged, rubbing sleep from your eyes. As he turns to you. You ready? He asks. You nod, unsure. He gives you a verse to repeat. It starts with an island name, followed by a list of star positions, a type of swell, and an unusual instruction involving a sea cucumber. You repeat it back. You stumble. You swap 2 stars. He raises one eyebrow and mutters. Now your canoe is lost. Apprentices like you spend years learning these. They're called Palu chants, and each line carries direction, distance, and environmental clues. Sometimes, they include nonsense words as memory anchors, phrases that seem meaningless but help remember which swell overlaps which current. Quirky fact. Some chants were taught during specific moon phases to match sea behavior. Others were only whispered before voyages, never sung on land. Later, the navigator teaches you to pair your chant with your senses. As you paddle, he recites a line, and you must guess what part of the world it describes. He says, when the stars form a straight leg and the fish float quiet. Follow the eastern dog's breath. You stare at him like he's written a riddle on the inside of your eyelids. He repeats it. You guess, early morning. Still wind. Clouds stacked low in the east. He shrugs. Close. But the fish were sleeping too soon. It's a midday swell. Back to chanting. Some verses use food metaphors. One island path is as short as a banana with no bruise. Another warns, go farther than your thirst, but not farther than a dried crab's patience. It makes no sense. It makes perfect sense. You learn that one particular chant describes an arc of 5 islands and ends with, turn when the parrot laughs. The parrot, it turns out, is a constellation. When its tail lines up with the western horizon, you change direction. If you forget that part, you miss the island by 2 days. Historians still argue how navigators memorized thousands of miles of ocean pathways without getting them tangled. Some believe they encoded routes as stories, mini epics with plot twists and tide shifts. Others argue it's just training, layered over decades. The sun climbs. You sweat through 2 mats. Your mouth goes dry. Still, you chant, one phrase after another, one star after another. The navigator corrects your pronunciation with the precision of a man who once rerouted an entire voyage because someone sang sharktail instead of turtlebone. You get it right by late afternoon. The full chant, clean, confident. You reach the last line and hold your breath. He nods. You found the island. You're handed a reward, a bite of roasted octopus and a clean strip of banana leaf to sit on. You've earned it. That evening, the crew gathers near the sail and shares older chants, some playful, some sacred. One apprentice sings a route to an island shaped like a sleeping pig. Another sings a lullaby version of a tide calendar. Someone else recites a weather chant about how to tell if a cloud means rain or just bad conversation. The sky darkens. The stars return. The navigator points at 3 in a row. Those are the tail stars. They guide you away, but they also bring you back. You lie back, your head pressed to the deck, and whisper the chant under your breath. The one you learned, the one that now lives behind your teeth like a compass. You say it again, slower. It feels like drawing a line across the sea using only your voice. The canoe sways gently beneath you. The waves don't speak, but they listen. You sleep, the chant still echoing in your head. If you forget everything else, you'll remember that. The storm doesn't roar in, it sighs. You wake before dawn to an unusual silence. The usual creaks, flaps, and coughs are missing. Even the birds are gone. The air feels thick. The clouds have tucked themselves low like crouching animals. And the wind has stopped asking questions. You look to the navigator. He's already awake, standing motionless at the bow. His eyes scanning the horizon. His hair unmoved by any breeze. No stars tonight, he mutters. You glance up. A blanket of cloud, stitched tight, has erased the sky. Your star paths are gone. The swell pattern is shifting. Everything you've relied on, vanished. And this, you're told, is when real navigation begins. There's no panic, no running around or yelling. The crew moves with quiet purpose. Sails are lowered, lashings are checked, the hull is inspected. Everyone knows what to do when the sky disappears. You are handed a paddle and told, simply, listen. With the stars hidden, the navigator shifts to backup tools, memory, rhythm, instincts, and the faint whisper of the ocean's deeper breath. The canoe drifts slightly. The swells have become disorganized, like an orchestra with no conductor. You're taught to close your eyes and sort them by feel. There are still two swell patterns, but now they cross at sharper angles. One is from the east, the other from the north. You feel them clashing beneath the hull, each one pushing and pulling like stubborn uncles at a wedding. Quirky fact: some navigators were known to press their heads directly against the canoe floor to better feel the hidden pulses. Others laid on their stomachs with their arms trailing in the water, reading the sea like braille. The clouds thicken. A fine mist begins to fall. Still no wind. The birds haven't returned. Storm hiding in there, the navigator says, tapping the mist. Not big, but stubborn. You continue paddling gently, adjusting course not by sight but by gut. You remember yesterday's chant. You remember the feel of the canoe's glide when it brushed the edge of a sea shelf. You recall where the birds were flying, where the fish jumped, and how the sky smelled of soil. You are not navigating blindly. You're just reading a different page. Historians still argue whether Polynesian navigators truly had such reliable internal maps, or whether they simply sailed in large zigzags until something appeared. The truth, likely, is somewhere in between, a mix of art, pattern memory, and careful improvisation. Rain begins, light but persistent. The ocean stays calm. The wind doesn't return. Your body becomes the map. The navigator sings softly to himself, half chant, half prayer. It's not for the storm. It's for the crew. You're told to track time with your heartbeat. One chant length is about 20 minutes. 2 chants, and you should see a color change in the water. 3 chants, and the swell should shift. If not, you're drifting too far. You count in your head. You listen for the rhythm of paddles against water. You note every bird call, every change in fish behavior, every shift in the way the water hugs the canoe. And slowly, very slowly, the rain begins to lighten. The mist thins. A single breeze returns, faint, like a whisper through a keyhole. Then, a hole in the cloud. Small, a blink of sky. Then another. The navigator looks up and hums something triumphant and wordless. The stars don't return all at once. Just one, then 2. Then a whole cluster appears like old friends returning to a party you thought had ended. Sirius blinks at you again. You smile. But more importantly, the swell smooths. The chaos fades. The canoe's glide returns. You feel it in your knees. That night, the crew eats dried fish in quiet celebration. Nobody cheers. Nobody makes a speech. But the way they sit closer, the way the paddles are stacked tighter, and the way the navigator finally lies down, these are their victory dances. You lie back and feel the canoe glide again. Smooth and sure, like it's found the right paragraph in the ocean's long story. The stars guide you now. But for a little while, it was just your bones and your breath. And they remembered exactly what to do. The stars are wide awake when you rise. You sit up slowly, limbs stiff, salt crusted to your skin like tiny barnacles. The sky above is absolutely littered with stars. A chaotic brilliance that now feels comforting rather than overwhelming. The canoe rocks gently beneath you. Not with tension, but with purpose. Today is landfall. You don't see it yet. Not clearly. But something in the crew's mood tells you it's close. They move differently. More focused. Less chatter. Even the navigator is humming a chant that you haven't heard before. One that has a rhythm like paddles brushing against sand. You're told to climb to the lookout position near the mast. It's not a high point. Just a platform wide enough for one apprentice and a sea-soaked gourd of drinking water. Your eyes scan the horizon. At first, nothing. Then, a shape. A dark smudge low on the water. Could be a cloud. Could be a trick of sleep deprivation. But you don't look away. The navigator climbs up beside you. He squints. Nods. That's her, he says. She waited. There it is. Your island. Still distant, but no longer theoretical. As you approach, the crew sings an old chant of welcome, not to the land, but to the voyage itself. For making it this far. You join in, your voice cracking slightly from salt and awe. The birds return first, circling overhead with lazy confidence. Then come the scents, damp greenery, faint fire smoke, something sweet you can't name. The color of the water changes again, from deep blue to bright teal to a kind of glassy green that makes your stomach flutter. You see movement along the island's edge. Trees sway gently. A few canoes bob near shore. Smoke curls lazily from huts behind a line of palms. Someone from the crew tosses bird feathers into the wind. It's a ritual, you're told, to thank the animals who guided the way. You help prepare the canoe for landing. Nets are folded, sail furled, lashings checked. The outrigger is rebalanced. You feel the nervous excitement that comes just before the finish line. And maybe something else, a small sadness that the journey is about to end. Quirky fact. On some islands, crews would throw small carved offerings into the water before arriving, mini canoes or fishhooks, to ask the sea to forget their names until the next voyage. A way to stay anonymous in the ocean's endless memory. The swell changes again as you near shore. Smaller now, choppier. You feel it in the way your ankles shift to balance. The way the canoe shivers gently under your weight. The navigator nods. She's protecting herself. The reef becomes visible, jagged and pale, but with a clear passage cut through. You aim for that. The crew paddles slowly now. Deliberately. The island looms larger. The clouds above it seem to move slower than the rest. You glance at the navigator. His eyes are fixed forward. No smile. Just stillness. You cross the reef cut. The canoe slides into calm lagoon water. The color of old jade and fish scales. You exhale. Deeply. Like your lungs have been holding the ocean this whole time. You see people on shore now. Not many. Just a few figures. One raises an arm in a slow wave. The crew doesn't respond yet. There's protocol. Ritual. The navigator stands and raises a palm frond staff wrapped with feathers. A gesture of peace. Of completion. You drift toward the sand. When the canoe finally crunches into the shore, it's gentle, soft, like stepping onto a sleeping friend's back. Feet splash into the shallows. You follow. The sand feels too solid after so many days of water. Your legs wobble. Your knees complain. You bend, scoop up a handful of wet earth, and press it to your face. It smells of home, even if you've never been here before. The navigator steps onto the shore last. He doesn't bow, doesn't speak. He just looks up at the trees and nods once. You've made landfall. And somehow, your heart beats like you never left. That night, you sit beside a fire made from driftwood and dry palm fronds. The stars still watch you. But now from the background. You eat roasted yams and something with far too many legs. You don't complain. You're too full of sky and salt and soft pride. The crew sings again. This time not for guidance, but for gratitude. You don't know all the words, but you hum along anyway. Your voice knows the rhythm now. Your body remembers the way. You're not paddling anymore. You're teaching. The island has welcomed you with the kind of warmth that seeps into your joints and settles behind your ribs. You sleep beneath a roof now, woven leaves, quiet breezes, and the sea still whispers just beyond the trees. But instead of steering across it, you watch it from the shore. Days pass slowly. The navigator remains quiet, but not distant. He walks the beach early each morning, testing sand with his bare feet, listening to birds, scanning clouds like they're letters addressed to him. You follow him sometimes, not to ask anything, just to observe the way he breathes. Then one morning, he hands you the guiding paddle. You take them, he says. They'll follow. You turn. A younger group waits behind you, 3 new apprentices. One wears his belt upside down. Another is chewing on a paddle. The third is fast asleep on a pile of netting. It begins again. You teach them how to watch the swell, how to sit on the deck with their knees wide and listen to the canoe's rhythm. You recite the chants they'll one day learn by heart, even if they fall asleep halfway through the banana metaphor. You tell them about Captain Drama, the bird who flies like she owns the ocean. You don't feel like a teacher, more like a bridge. The old knowledge lives in your bones now, and when you speak, it moves through you like wind through the sail. One of the apprentices asks how far the stars can carry you. You answer without thinking, as far as your chant can hold. They write that down, on a fish scale, with a crab leg. Progress. The navigator watches you from the canoe. He says nothing, but when you glance over, he lifts one eyebrow, the same way he used to when you got something almost right. Which, in his language, is a standing ovation. Quirky fact. Some navigators would test new apprentices by waking them in the middle of the night, pointing at a star, and saying only, "Which island?" If the apprentice hesitated, they went back to memorizing tide chants. If they answered instantly, they were ready to voyage. You're not just ready to voyage. You're ready to teach others to sail beyond the horizon with only birds and starlight and a bellyful of fermented fish. One night, around the fire, one of your new crew sings a broken version of your favorite chant. The words are out of order. The rhythm is wild, but something in it works. You don't correct them. You just smile and add a harmony. The navigator nods once and rises to leave. He doesn't say goodbye. He doesn't need to. He vanishes into the shadows of the palm grove, swallowed by the same silence he always carried like a cloak. You don't follow. Not this time. You're the navigator now. And so, as night deepens and the waves lap gently against the hulls waiting in the sand, you gather your new crew. You tell them a story about seafoam that speaks and islands that dream. About a canoe that learned to glide with closed eyes and an apprentice who could finally feel the stars. They listen, wide-eyed, barefoot, hungry. You step into the canoe, grip the paddle, and point to the horizon where one bright star has just begun to rise. You smile. Then you push off. You feel the swell, the pull of wind, the angle of current, and you hear the canoe sigh in recognition. Now, close your eyes and breathe deeply. The ocean has quieted, the canoe drifting near shore, gently rocking in the embrace of a calm lagoon. Overhead, stars settle into their nightly positions, steady, familiar. Sirius glows softly in the east. The Southern Cross leans low near the horizon. Even the birds have gone to roost. Your hands are no longer gripping the paddle. They rest in your lap, warm from the day's sun. Your legs are stretched before you, cradled by the curves of the canoe you've learned to trust. The sea hums beneath you. Not loud, not sharp, just a rhythm. A lullaby tuned to your heartbeat. The chant you learned still whispers in the back of your mind. Not demanding, not urgent, just a friendly reminder that you carry the map now. It lives in your breath, your spine, your sleep. In the dark beyond the reef, waves roll and break like quiet applause. Somewhere, a bird calls once, then goes silent. The air is warm, the salt on your skin is dry now, leaving behind only memory. You let the night hold you. You let the journey settle. You have reached land, but you still drift, lightly, gently, safely. The stars are watching, the water is calm, your body is tired, and you, navigator, can finally rest.